Hi everybody, it's a beautiful day, so I thought I'd sit outside and read you some of a new book that I've not even finished reading yet. And this one is called The Explorer by Catherine Rundell. And the blurb at the back says, "When their plane crashes, 4 children are stranded in the Amazon jungle. Now they have to survive alone, but with someone there before them." And it has lots of reviews saying that it is a great adventure story with wonderful settings and written by a talented writer for children. So let's have a listen and see what happens. Okay, so we open with a picture. There's a shadow of a plane and there's a setting there. And this chapter is called Flight. Like a man-made magic wish, the aeroplane began to rise. The boy sitting in the cockpit gripped his seat and held his breath as the plane climbed into the arms of the sky. Fred's jaw was set with concentration and his fingers twitched, following the movements of the pilot beside him. Joystick, throttle. The aeroplane vibrated as it flew faster into the setting sun, following the swerve of the Amazon River below them. Fred could see the reflection of the 6-seater plane, a spot of black on the vast sweep of blue, as it sped towards Manaus, the city on the water. He brushed his hair out of his eyes and pressed his forehead against the window. Behind Fred sat a girl and her little brother. They had the same slanted eyebrows and the same brown skin, the same long eyelashes. The girl had been shy, hugging her parents until the last possible moment at the airfield. Now she was staring down at the water, singing under her breath, her brother trying to eat his seatbelt. In the next row, on her own, sat a pale girl with blonde hair down to her waist. Her blouse had a neck ruffle that came up to her chin, and she kept tugging it down and grimacing. She was determinedly not looking out of the window. The airfield they had just left had been dusty and almost deserted, just a strip of tarmac under the ferocious Brazilian sun. Fred's cousin had insisted that he wear his school uniform and cricket jumper, and now, inside the hot, airless cabin, he felt like he was being gently cooked inside his own skin. The engine gave a whine, and the pilot frowned and tapped the joystick. He was old and soldierly, with brisk nostril hair and a grey, waxed moustache, which seemed to reject the laws of gravity. He touched the throttle, and the plane soared upwards, higher into the clouds. It was almost dark when Fred began to worry. The pilot began to belch. I'm not sure if you know what that means, but it's another word for making a kind of burping noise. He began to belch, first quietly, and then violently and repeatedly. His hand jerked, and the plane dipped suddenly to the left. Someone screamed behind Fred. The plane lurched away from the river and over the canopy. The pilot grunted, gasped, and wound back the throttle, slowing the engine. He gave a cough that sounded like a choke. Fred stared at the man. He was turning the same shade of grey as his moustache. Are you all right, sir?" he asked. Is there something I can do?" Fighting for breath, the pilot shook his head. He reached over to the control panel and cut the engine. The roar ceased. The nose of the plane dipped downwards, and the trees rose up. "What's happening?" asked the blonde girl sharply. "What's he doing? Make him stop!" The little boy in the back began to shriek. The pilot grasped Fred's wrist hard for a single moment, and then his head slumped against the dashboard. And the sky, which had seconds before seemed so reliable, gave way. Oh my goodness, it sounds quite scary actually. I'm going to read the next few paragraphs just so that we can see what's happening. So the next chapter is called The Green Dark. We have a picture here of the forest. And they mentioned the word canopy a moment ago. That's the canopy of the trees in the forest. Fred wondered as he ran if he was dead. But, he thought, death would surely be quieter. The roar of the flames and his own blood vibrated in his hands and feet. The night was black. He tried to heave in breath to shout for help as he ran, but his throat was too dry and ashy to yell. He jabbed his finger into the back of his tongue to summon up spit. "Is anyone there? Help! Fire!" he shouted. The fire called back in response. A tree behind him sent up a mountain of flames. There was a rumble of thunder. Nothing else replied. A burning branch cracked, spat red, and fell in a cascade of sparks. Fred leapt away, stumbling backwards into the dark and smacking his head against something hard. The branch landed exactly where he'd been standing just seconds before. He swallowed the bile that rose in his throat and began to run again, faster and wilder. Something landed on his chin, and he ducked, smacking at his face, but it was only a raindrop. The rain came, suddenly and hard. It turned the soot and sweat on his hands to something like tar, but it began to quench the fire. Fred slowed his run to a jog, and then to a stop. Gasping, choking, he looked back the way he had come. The little aeroplane was in the trees. It was smoking, sending up clouds of white and grey into the night sky. Oh yes, you can actually see that in that picture. The plane's here, there's the tail of the plane. He stared around, dizzy and desperate, but he couldn't see or hear a single human, only the fern-like plants growing around his ankles and the trees reaching hundreds of feet up into the sky, and the panicked dive and shriek of the birds. He shook his head hard, trying to banish the shipwreck roar in his ears. The hair on his arms was singed and smelt of eggs. He put his hand to his forehead. His eyebrow had charred and part of it came away on his fingers. He wiped his eyebrow on the sleeve of his shirt. Fred looked down at himself. One leg of his trousers was ripped all the way up to the pocket, but none of his bones felt broken. There was vicious pain, though, in his back and his neck, and it made his arms and legs feel far off and foreign. A voice suddenly came from the dark. "Who's there? Get away from us!" Fred spun round, his ears still buzzing. He grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it in the direction of the voice. He ducked behind a tree and crouched on his haunches, poised to jump or run. His heart sounded like a one-man band, and he tried not to exhale. The voice said, "For God's sake, don't throw things!" It was a girl's voice. Fred looked out from behind the tree. The light of the moon filtered deep green to the forest floor, casting long-fingered shadows against the trees, and he could only see 2 bushes, both of them rustling. "Who is it? Who's there?" The voice came from the second bush. Fred squinted through the dark, feeling the remaining hair rise up on his arms. "Please don't hurt us," said the bush. The accent wasn't British, it was something softer, and the voice was definitely a child's, not an adult's. "Was it you, throwing poo?" Fred looked down at the ground. He'd snatched up a piece of years-old fossilised animal dung. "Oh," he said, "yes." He was becoming accustomed to the dark and could see the shine of eyes peering out from the grey-green gloom of the undergrowth. Good alliteration there, caught me out. Grey-green gloom. "Are you from the plane? Are you hurt?" "Yes, we're hurt. We fell out of the sky," said one bush, as the other said, not badly hurt." "You can come out," said Fred. "It's only me here." The second bush parted. Fred's heart gave a great leap. Both the girl and her brother were covered in scratches and burns and ash, which had mixed with sweat and rain and made a kind of paste on their faces. But they were alive. He was not alone. "You survived," he said. And I'll leave it there. I'm going to carry on reading this so that I can tell you what happens, but it looks like a really good and exciting book.